All right, hello. We are still waiting a little bit for more attendees to come, and then we will start the panel in a few seconds. Okay, still waiting for a few more seconds before we start. Some more attendees can join us. Okay, let's go. So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This webinar will be hosted by Dataxis. We are a data analysis and digital event company working on telecom, TV, and video markets worldwide. And we are happy today to work with Ateme and Anevia, our sponsor for this session today. The whole presentation will be recorded and later available on our website if you want to catch up with it. And you can also drop your question in the Q&A box. We will be taking a few minutes at the end of this presentation to answer you with our panelists. So we will be talking today about content monetization and how to create great opportunities with dynamic targeted ad insertion and personalized TV. And we welcome today 4 panelists. Hello, all of you. So we start with Tebbe, who is the Director of Advanced Advertising at Liberty Global. Hello.
Hi, Ophélie.
Hi. So Liberty Global is a pay TV operator which has 9% market share of total direct pay TV revenues in Europe at Q2 2020. They are present in 6 European countries and reaching almost 10 million pay TV subscribers. And they started developing addressable advertising in the UK, Ireland, and Belgium, which we'll discuss together afterwards. Then we also have Tom Griffiths, who is the Director of Technology, Content Supply, and Distribution at ITV. Hello, Tom.
Hello, everyone.
So ITV is the third biggest private broadcaster in terms of advertising revenues in Europe, with 1.8 billion euros in revenues, and they're operating the most watched free-to-air channel in the UK, as well as having their own direct-to-consumer OTT service, ITV Hub, which we'll also discuss about later on. And we have Remi Beaudouin, Chief Strategy Officer at Ateme, and Damien, CTO and co-founder of Anevia. So both coming from our sponsors today. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Philippe.
And Ateme and Anevia are solution providers for innovative live and on-demand video delivery, focusing on experience quality. Both companies will be merging at the end of the year, and they're currently employing more than 400 people, and they have 1,000 clients across 100 countries worldwide. So before I let our speakers start with today's discussion, I will give you some element of context through a quick overview of the TV, video, and advertising markets in Europe. So first, talking about advertising. TV advertising revenues in Europe have been stagnating for the last decade, between 20 and 25 billion euros generated yearly, as you can see on the chart. And COVID-19 has been hitting the market at the turn of 2020. So we expect a slow recovery in the next years, but by 2025, the market should just be around the same levels as during the past 3 years. And on this map, you can see that markets are very different across Europe. So Western Europe represents 3/4 of the TV advertising market in value. And the biggest national markets are in this area, with 4 of them generating more than 3 billion euros each year in the UK, France, Germany, and Italy. Then, despite representing 1/3 of European population, in Eastern Europe, this region accounts for less than 10% of the advertising market in value, so it's quite different. And then we also have different areas like the Nordics, which is a very advanced video market, but where advertising revenues are limited by a small audience, less than 30 million people. So they account for only 7% of advertising revenues in the region. If we talk now about pay TV specifically, pay TV operators still see their subscribers progressing, as you can see on the chart, but mostly coming from new OTT digital services. And this trend goes at different pace depending on the areas. But overall, this demonstrates that, Overall, this demonstrates the popularity of new video consumption uses, with TV being watched more and more on video-on-demand solutions. And the market is going towards a more personalized viewing and experience and more content selection. So OTT services are generally cheaper than pay TV offers, which is why they represent such a strong competition against traditional fixed pay TV operators. Average revenues per user of traditional pay TV accesses have been stagnating for 3 years. But if we take into account the whole market, including the expansion of OTT pay TV services over the past 5 years, we can see on the second chart here that ARPUs have been scaling down and losing an average of 30 cents every year since 2015. And traditional pay TV operators are adjusting to these new trends by offering more personalized subscription plans, which also decreases their ARPUs because customers can now subscribe to selected features to get cheaper offers. And video consumption expenses by viewers are not necessarily going down, but usage is shifting towards multiple OTT subscriptions along with a cheaper tailored pay TV plan. If we now focus on digital video streaming, we can see that subscription video on demand should reach around 130 million subscribers in Europe at the end of this year, soon catching up with pay TV households in the area. But despite growing revenues on the video streaming industry, the sector starts facing significant challenges. We observe a stacking of services on most advanced markets, like in the Nordics, where more than half of the households are subscribing to at least one video streaming offer. And we also have similar trends on some Western European markets. Then another issue is that there are less opportunities for price-driven revenue growth in emerging markets, like in Central and Eastern Europe, because viewers there still show a clear preference for free content advertising-based video streaming, and the average revenues per users are 3 times lower than in Western Europe. So even if advertising video on demand revenues are still progressing, as you can see on the first chart here in green, we estimate that YouTube will retain a 70% market share in 2020, leaving other European players a market of less than 2 billion euros to share. As a third point, the competition between players is very intense. There are more than 180 platforms operating across Europe, and many players are now operating hybrid businesses to attract more viewers and more revenues. So basing their subscription plans on premium video on demand offers like ITV Hub in the UK, Join in Germany, Dplay in the Nordics, or IV and Megogo in the CIS. So in this context of very intense competition, TV operators and video streaming players have to adjust to new market developments to pull in more revenues, and video consumption uses are evolving towards more personalization, and this opens new opportunities for addressable advertising. So today we will be talking about addressable TV, including both the traditional TV environment, which means set-top boxes and connected smart TVs, but also digital OTT services. And I will now let Remi and Damien, our sponsors today, start with a quick introduction on the personalized TV and addressable advertising industry.
Thank you, Ophélie, and thanks everyone to be with us today. So first, what are we discussing about? We are discussing about the ability of content owners, content providers, and pay TV operators to customize their offer when they reach a D2C service. As we will discuss with Tom and Albert-Jan, we see that this move is mandatory and compulsory for TV players, content providers, pay TV operators, so that they can differentiate amongst the crowd. When we talk about customization, we can talk about various flavors. It could be regionalization. You customize the stream depending on a city, a region, a neighborhood. It could be personalization in terms of, for instance, advertisement that you receive, whatever this is, dynamic advertisement, targeted advertisement, or programmatic advertisement. And again, we will get back on that with Damien later on. And the third point is also about personalization, meaning how you can really customize and personalize the television that you receive, the content that you receive, per your taste, per your geography, per what you want to see. And we have numerous research that show that when you customize your offer, your service, you keep up engaging much more with your subscriber. So we will talk about reducing churn rate. We will talk about increasing average revenue per user. And that will be all the notion that we'll be discussing about. Damien, do you want to add something?
Yes, maybe what is interesting is that we are currently, what we're seeing is most of our customers are currently switching to OTT. And because OTT is really unicast based, it enables all these personalization possibilities. So from a technical point of view, there is a huge opportunity right now to do much more personalization, and I believe we will discuss, the different technologies associated to that as well in the next few minutes.
Okay, so let's start this panel together. I have a very simple question as it starts. Why are broadcasters and operators entering this new market? Why do addressable advertising? So I would start with Albert. Can you tell us from Liberty Global's perspective, from an operator perspective, what are your interests in this new market?
Yes, absolutely. Historically, we always have been active in advertising on our platforms. For example, in the UK and also in Ireland, we're selling VOD advertising for a number of years already. And we think that addressable TV advertising, which might even, from which VOD might even fit that definition, by the way. But we see addressable TV advertising mainly as linear, linear ad replacement on broadcast channels. And obviously, these days there are broader definitions of that. But obviously, the most challenging and the most advanced example of addressable TV advertising is on broadcast channels. And we basically see this as a new revenue opportunity. We think there is a need for addressability. Obviously, the traditional linear advertising revenues are under pressure because of big tech platforms, online advertising in general. And we all know that the capabilities of targeting on those platforms are much more sophisticated than on broadcast television. So we think the innovation of addressable TV advertising is actually necessary to get on par in terms of targeting possibilities. So it not only helps us to create a new incremental revenue stream, but it also helps broadcasters to you know, to get that new incremental revenue stream. So we look at it from two angles, and obviously in some of our countries where we operate, we also own broadcasters, and they also have a need for innovation and a need for more sophisticated targeting. And if you have a look at where addressable TV advertising has been deployed in the past couple of years, the countries where platforms own a broadcaster are the first moving countries, basically. So obviously Sky is an example in the UK, Sky AdSmart, owned by Sky Media, but also SBS and Telenet in Belgium. And in the UK, we are working together with Sky AdSmart. Main reason being is that there are no standards, technical standards for addressable TV advertising, at least not on broadcasts, so linear replacement on broadcast. So by working together with Sky AdSmart, obviously we comply with their technical standards. And we help to basically to develop the market by creating a market standard. And I think this is an absolute necessity to move the needle, to get the necessary skill and the necessary reach, which is really important to move advertisers to join this and start doing targeted advertising.
All right. ITV catching up on this because Liberty Global, so you mentioned that in some markets you also own broadcasters, and there is a need for innovation. What is the stand of ITV on that point? What is your strategy, and why are you doing addressable advertising?
I mean, I guess the shortest answer to that is, as audiences are starting to consume content on different platforms, then opportunities and the flow of money for advertising is also diversifying along with it. Traditionally we've been seen as the kind of first place destination in the UK for TV advertising, and particularly for kind of big brand and big reach type advertising, being the largest commercial broadcaster in the UK. But clearly audiences aren't just watching TV content on traditional linear platforms any longer, whether that be linear services themselves or indeed on kind of traditional TV platforms. And we've been building on we've been on this journey now for over 10 years. The predecessor of ITV Hub has been around for well over 10 years now. But I think it's really in the last few years, as the scale of reach that ITV Hub has had, we're now up to 32 million subscribers, and we've had double-digit growth for a number of years now. And particularly, I think, notably this year, I guess, the broader trend about increasing consumption because of the COVID situation. That actually means now it's not just an incremental piece to our traditional kind of TV advertising, but actually it's a major revenue stream in and of itself. An ITV Hub started life as essentially a broadcast video on demand platform, really a catch-up platform, and our desire with it is it becomes, it'll be more than just seen as a catch-up platform, but a destination in and of itself. And, for some audiences, particularly when you look at younger demographics and programs like Love Island, those audiences are going straight to ITV Hub to watch the content. They're not just watching it on the Hub if they missed it live. They're watching it as live IP streams on there. If they miss it, they're watching it as catch-up immediately after the program is gone. And so that's offering, I think, two opportunities. One is that kind of money is moving, if you like, from traditional linear into the OTT space, and clearly we want to hold on to as much of that revenue as it moves. But also the point that Albert made as well is opening up new revenue opportunities as well, as we can reach kind of advertisers who might not traditionally see themselves as TV advertisers, for whom the budgets that you might need for kind of the big 5 million plus audience reach adverts, are just outside of their budgets. Particularly as you start talking about more targeted adverts, where actually we can target those ads at particular demographics or particular areas, then actually you start to open up the market to people who wouldn't traditionally think of TV content as an audience they can advertise in, and yet they have a desire to, because we all know that the video mediums are a very, very engaged medium from advertisers' perspectives. It's a very effective advertising medium. And for those reasons, you know, it's a great opportunity, if you like, to both to kind of make sure that our existing revenue streams are protected, but also to open up those new revenue streams as well. And I think we also see that sometimes there's a narrative about it's all one or thing or the other thing. You know, it's all, you know, linear TV advertising is dead and it's all going to be about OTT and VOD advertising. And we just don't see that. That's not the case in the market. There are different kinds of advertising for different kinds of purposes. And you're being able to serve all of those needs of the advertisers is really kind of, I guess, where our aim is as a result of this.
All right. So different kinds of advertising for different kinds of purposes. Interesting.
Yeah, traditionally, you know, linear TV is always seen as the place to do brand building, whereas online advertising is seen to you know, to activate people and to, you know, try to get them purchase products.
Yeah. And it's interesting the point that I think Damien made about kind of regionalization, personalization as well, because of course on traditional TV platforms, and we've actually operated a very highly regional, what we call our main channel, ITV1, has been highly regional for years, you know, and that's been a very successful way of selling, you know, kind of regionally targeted adverts. But of course, as we've said, on traditional platforms, it's a one-way street, and so you can't really do personalization. As we start delivering over IP, then actually it's opened up all those doors to actually really understanding the behavior of the customer, both from a perspective of being able, therefore, to kind of personalize their own content experience, to keep them engaged and keep them coming into the platform, but also therefore to understand more about their, you know, through the content and through other things you know about them, knowing what they want, and therefore actually being able to give them a, you know, if you like, to them, hopefully a much more valuable advertising experience.
And I think that's key, Tom. What you described, television is not dead. I mean, content is not dead. When you look at the audience, the eyeball keep increasing. It's just that we are shifting from one mainstream television, the broadcast, to a different medium where you have multiple screen, a different way of consuming, not necessarily television, but content, as both you and Tom, you and Albert, you described. So we are moving from a TV experience to a content experience. And it both creates opportunities and a bit of earthquake. The opportunity is that we can leverage the flexibility of the digital and OTT world. Because you are on an app, you are not, I would say, stuck with the classic broadcast infrastructure, which was great, but which could be a bit more complicated to change. Now with the OTT, you can adjust more dynamically. And when you look at the eyeball numbers, people are shifting from the main screen to these multiple screens. So they enjoy reading it. So the money is going that way as well. When you look at the ad spending on all these screens, we can see that the ads investment on OTT platform keep increasing, and they leverage the good practices coming from the digital world. So that's a good sign. When we look at it, I was mentioning the earthquake. It does create some different behavior to adapt, because when you look at the number of platforms that we are facing worldwide, there is not a single week where we don't see any new OTT platform announcement. Whatever this is, TVOD, SVOD, AVOD, there are always a new announcement. And at some point, OTT providers need to find a way to differentiate. Because if they don't differentiate, they won't win the new money stream that they can gain on OTT. So they won't be able to capture the ad revenue and the average revenue per user that they want to gain from the OTT, the same average revenue per user that they are losing on the main screen. And in order to do so, the personalization is one way to be different. So again, like we were mentioning in the beginning, it could be targeted ad insertion. It could be also how you personalize the content. Eventually, you engage more with the end user so that they keep their subscription, you can increase the ads revenue flow based on targeted ad insertion or advertisement, and eventually you increase your revenue. So it's more a way where we follow the shift rather than discover a completely new world.
Yeah, you're right. It's all about engagement with the content, obviously, and you're right to describe the new trend of OTT services, and people want those services, obviously. So as Liberty Global, we're also embracing that and basically trying to aggregate those services on our platform. And obviously, you need to be there where the eyeballs are. But also those new services also create a different behavior. You know, more and more content is being watched on demand versus on a live linear channel, and this also creates a different expectation to what people how people are experiencing advertising. You know, the key question obviously for the coming years is how do we deal with the traditional ad breaks? You know, within programs, between programs. How can we optimize? How can we create a better experience?
Yeah, and I think to both those points, another thing I think we often get hung up on within the industry are it's kind of traditional platforms and linear and OTT, and those being two very different worlds. And you know, and if you like, from a delivery perspective, they are very different. But I think if you're a consumer, then actually it's just they're just different ways of receiving content. And actually, the more we can bring a unified experience across linear and OTT to consumers, the more likely they are to stay in a platform. And I think there's probably a similar thing for advertisers as well. You know, traditionally, the way that linear ads and on-demand platform ads have been sold is very different. You know, different currencies and a very different kind of approach to doing that. And we think actually that there are, you know, that increasingly people want to kind of see that more as an overall ecosystem, that they can manage their campaigns across both kind of traditional linear spot ads and extending those into VOD reach as well. And one of the aims of our Planet V products that was launched just very recently is to try and help create that bridge between those different propositions. Just as viewers want that, advertisers potentially want to, you know, have campaigns which have a number of objectives to them. You know, and I don't think we help advertisers if we give them completely different kind of ad buying experiences across those different platforms.
Yeah, and there is another market aspect to keep in mind is when you can invest on ads. Of course, people like ITV or Liberty Global can increase the ad stream revenue clearly, but ads, and especially targeted ads insertion or advertisement, is one way to finance the OTT service. And when we look at the number of OTT service which is growing, one of the downsides could be that at some point people won't be able to pay for each and every subscription. And this is why nowadays we see a trend for AVOD, and so for targeted AVOD service, whereby the ads may finance the service, and eventually the end subscriber will register, they will receive ads, but at least they won't need to pay for another service. Because if they end up saying 10, 20, 30 different services, we know that it's not going to happen. So the targeted advertisement is also a way to work around that.
Yeah, you're right, Remi. And I guess ITV is a good example of AVOD, because the ITV hub is not only linear, but there's also lots of video on demand content, which obviously is funded by advertising. And I would say even more innovative is the possibility to actually subscribe to an ad-free service. So if you don't like the ads, then you can even get rid of it and just pay a small subscription fee. And I guess we will be seeing more of those hybrid, hybrid forms.
I think that's exactly right, Albajan. And in the US, you see a number of the platforms are doing these kind of to a T3 type of offerings now. There's, you know, the pure play AVOD, pure play SVOD, and sometimes a bit like we have with our Hub Plus, something that's partway in the middle between those, where for a kind of smaller subscription, you can have, you know, some of the features of the the SVOD experience, but at a lower subscription point than a fully fledged SVOD proposition. I think Remi, you're right that clearly SVOD has been very dominant in the conversation for some years now, and you can see why with the growth of it. But as we know from linear TV, if the equation is right about how you present advertising into video content, people are happy actually and willing to accept that trade of advertising for the sake of effectively not paying for a subscription. It's a similar narrative to kind of in the more traditional world, kind of free-to-air TV versus pay TV.
Yeah, and I think the big benefit of addressable TV advertising is that it helps to make advertising more relevant for the viewer.
Yeah.
And obviously this takes time, because the majority of advertising, at least on the linear channels, will stay mass advertising, but over time I expect this to increase.
That's right, and I think we will see it, particularly in linear. I think in video on demand, it's highly likely that most of the advertising will be more targeted. But I think in linear, over time we will see more of a mix of the big brand building kind of awareness reach type adverts mixed in with addressable advertising, even within the same ad breaks.
Yeah.
Yeah. You already all mentioned that differently, but doing addressable advertising on linear TV and on D2C OTT platform services are very different. Maybe for Liberty Global Alert, you can talk a bit about how you implemented your operational markets and how do you work with local operators, local actors in regard of that?
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned at more or less the start of this conversation, we have deployed addressable TV advertising on the set-top box environment in the UK, for example, but also in Belgium. And this is an example of what we call linear ad replacement. So it basically replaces a one-on-one ad. So it replaces an existing linear ad by an addressable ad. And this technology works in such a way that all the ads are pre-ingested on the platform and actually distributed to the relevant set-top boxes. So depending on what audience segment you are in as a household, you get the relevant ads already on your set-top box. And once there is a good opportunity to launch this ad, basically according to the advertising schedule, the actual creative, so the commercial, is being ingested from, or replaced is a better word, from the set-top box rather than from a central ad server. As mentioned, we work together with Sky AdSmart. Main reason being is they already had an existing business. They are doing this for 6-7 years already. So obviously they know the business, they know how to sell it. And as we've seen that there are lots of new to TV advertisers making use of this opportunity. Most likely because it's most relevant for them. The typical fast moving consumer goods are focused on the mass audience. So they need this kind of targeting. Sometimes they may need, by the way, to extend their reach. Recent research has actually shown that it's really difficult to, for example, to reach the so-called light viewer, people who only watch a few hours per day, well, maybe not a few hours, maybe half an hour per day, or just a few hours per week. And it takes a big investment to reach those people. And with addressable advertising, obviously, it's a piece of cake. If they fit the segment criteria, then they get to see an ad. So the reason to work with Sky, other than they have an existing market, is the technology. It makes sense to have a market standard, so a local national market standard, because most of the advertising markets are nationally focused. And it takes a certain skill to make things successful. As you can imagine, that if you combine all kinds of audience attributes, then the total volume of such a segment can be rather small. And if the segment size is too small, it doesn't, it's not worth to actually do the campaign. So a certain scale is actually necessary.
Okay. Maybe, Tom, you can talk a little bit about Planet V. You already started mentioning it, but because it's a completely different strategy, since you're operating mostly on a direct-to-consumer OTT platform, and it's a very different world than linear TV.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I mean, so Planet V, I mean, actually, we've been building that for a while now with our partner Amobi, but initially we've been offering it as a concierge service. And it's effectively we've been operating the platform on behalf of advertisers, but it's now been launched as a full end-to-end self-service platform. And really, it's very much along the lines of what we've been talking about here. It's enabling our advertising customers to kind of make the best use of the inventory that we've got on the platform, to be able to better kind of target, just to Alvajan's point, to really let's kind of target the audience they want to go for. And also to help them potentially to extend their campaigns from linear into video on demand as well, to provide part of that bridge. And I think there is a key point here about the scale of inventory. I think you need a platform with enough scale in it that those campaigns can really work. If your segmentation is very precise, there needs to be a big enough audience to actually that's consuming the content for those type of campaigns to really work. I think that's one of the the advantages now. The scale that ITV Hub has is that we can offer that to advertisers. I think another key point about that as well is the kind of the value of the data that we can bring to advertisers there. All our own subscription data and understanding the behavior of our customers, but also having some kind of trusted third-party data providers that still tries to get the right balance between providing a real insight into the audience and the individuals we're targeting, whilst also kind of maintaining the privacy requirements of that audience, because there's a trust trade-off with our viewers there. I think that's the real high value proposition of it. And whilst the initial target of that is really around kind of VOD campaigns, we have ourselves, like Alvajan says, we've been doing linear ad replacement for a few years now on ITV Hub, and I've got that to a point now where actually users don't they don't know that's happening. They happen to be watching the two things next to each other, so it's quite a seamless experience. But there's a real opportunity once we can start to bring that into Planet V as well, and offering people that ability to target in linear services as well as on video on demand.
All right. Maybe now a question for Damien. Has a backend ad insertion solution provider. We talked already that there is a need for creating national standards, as Elliot mentioned already in the UK. What kind of actors are you working with, and what is the fragmentation you see? What are the different standards, and how do you cope with it?
Yes, definitely, this is an area where there is probably not enough standards, and there is definitely a need of standards. And as we can see, there are different players in this area, and the challenges for a broadcaster is very different from the challenges of a telecom operator. This is because of the kind of knowledge they have on the customer, whether they have all the knowledge in order to get a better value for the advertisers, or whether they need to actually bring additional knowledge from other data management platform. That's definitely part of the equation, as we already said before. The kind of service is very dimensioning as well, because obviously on the VOD service, it's much easier to insert ads because you are not constrained on the duration of the ad break. You can change that. You can add one small ad or two ads. It's no big deal. That can change easily. Whereas if you are trying to change a full ad break and to replace a full ad break on the linear, then you have to get the right technology in order to build an ad break that has exactly the same duration as the original ad break. It cannot be shorter and it cannot be longer. It has to be exactly the same combination. which is definitely not easy. And that's probably the reason why starting with a one-on-one replacement, as Albert-Jan said before, is probably a good first step before getting into the whole complexity of building this ad break in general. So this is a portion of the equation. Portion of the equation also is on the way the ads are ingested, and as I think Albert-Jan said also, is how long before the actual replacement can you get the content. If you got days to prepare the ads, to ingest the ads, and to have everything ready, it's obviously way easier than in a pure programmatic world where you would have only 100 milliseconds, maybe a few minutes in some cases, in order to prepare the content. So all this makes a lot of complexity, still very few standards. And if you put on that all the legal constraints, which are different on a almost per country, even though there are some European positions, let's say, it stays on a per country difference. It makes each ad insertion or ad replacement project kind of unique. So the idea, what we're trying to build and what we've built between Ateme and Anevia over the past few years is a platform that is already pre-integrated from the video data plane point of view, and that has easy interactions with the ad decision servers, with the different ad inventory platforms, and so on, to make it as easily integrated as possible. And the target of a good integration should definitely be the quality of experience. We haven't reached that point yet, but when we said that the target is to have something similar between broadcast, I mean traditional TV broadcast, and OTT, the target is also to have something as smooth on the OTT as it is currently on the traditional TV. And I believe there is still a lot of work to be done in this area because on many services, we're seeing some, breaks between the ad and the content itself, whether that's rebuffering issues with those spinning wheels, or quality issues, or resolution changes, audio volume not being exactly the same, etc., etc. So still a lot of work, and that's what we're working on.
All right, maybe Albert or Tom, you can react on that one regarding continuous viewing experience. What would be your expectations as media players and as TV operators?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to pick up that one as well. I think I've mentioned it earlier on that kind of viewing experience, there is an expectation that on an OTT platform, the experience is just as seamless as on a traditional broadcast platform. And I think potentially, even higher expectations actually over time. I think having a bumpy experience coming in and out of ad breaks definitely is a big detractor for that, and we've seen it as a really high priority. And certainly when we first started doing linear replacement a couple of years ago, we discovered ourselves, it's hard to do it actually. It's hard to do it really, really well. And it takes a lot of tuning and a lot of work to do it. And there are all sorts of trade-offs. You've got, how, obviously it's difficult with a set-top box, but with a pure play OTT offering like the Hub, how far in advance do you call the ad server and preload the ad? And what's the trade-off between that and your ability to ultimately to be programmatic, even if you aren't at the start? How do you make sure that transition is smooth? I mean, the last thing anyone wants is that awful experience of you come out of the content that you're watching and then there's buffering into the ads or buffering back into the content again. Those are just, I think, frankly, they're real no-nos. And certainly when we were doing linear ad replacement, the target there was you could replace an ad in a break and the viewer wouldn't know that the ad had been replaced. So the join between two ads had to be as smooth as it would have been if it was coming straight out of a playout suite. And that is tough. And I think to Damien's point, there aren't really any standards in this area yet. So I think a lot of players like us and others have had to kind of feel their way as they've gone. And I think there are beginnings of standards in some of those areas and some of the component pieces for it. And we've certainly been engaged in trying to help to drive those standards forwards, because the more there are standards for this, ultimately it drives down the cost of implementation and delivery for everyone in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and funny enough, the set-top box environment is actually a step further in that sense, that a seamless replacement is basically the standard these days.
Yeah, and I think it's a must. And if we don't do that, then I think it kind of breaks the whole experience for the viewer, and at the end of the day, that's not going to be good for the advertiser either. Because the danger is that actually could damage kind of engagement with the ad if people are kind of having that kind of bad experience coming in or out of an ad or an ad break. And I think to that point, Demi, you made about kind of the extent to which you're replacing an ad versus a whole ad break. I mean, I think that's a whole other area that we're certainly very interested in, and we've been trying to do quite a lot of work on the kind of back end signaling and triggering that we need to do, that gives you ultimately the flexibility to do everything from replacing a single ad to replacing a whole ad break in linear. And there's a lot involved in that, actually, and a lot of data points that you need to share. And I think it does get very interesting when you then talk about trying to do that across multiple different platforms, all of whom have got different delivery mechanisms at the end. And the question is, how much of that can you unify, if you like, in the back end of the delivery platform, and then only kind of tailor as for the platform specific requirements right at the end of the chain, because it's only that way ultimately that you're going to kind of scale this affordably across multiple platforms.
I
Yeah,
fully agree with that.
That's still a challenge indeed. Oh yeah, go ahead, Damien.
Yeah, just one point, because I believe what Tom just said is very, very important. The unification of the platform, but actually it's not even unification. The only way to, and that's my belief, the only way to actually have something really seamless is to build a platform that is natively able to do that ad replacement. If you start building a platform for linear delivery and a different platform for ad delivery, it will be very difficult to integrate those two platforms together. So at some point, plugging an ad delivery platform on an existing infrastructure is a challenge, because most of the time you have to review a big portion of the existing infrastructure in order to have this infrastructure host that ad delivery capacity. So it cannot be seen as just a small addition to the platform. It needs a redesign, and it's really to be designed for ad replacement, ad insertion, or whatever such technology from day one, I believe, and fully agreed on that unification question. Sorry,
yeah, probably because of that reason, a total video proposition, consisting out of linear as well as OTT or on demand is probably a long way off, because of these, these difficult to unite differences of platforms.
Maybe one last question, because time is running before we start replying to our attendees. How do you measure addressable TV audiences? Because Damien, you mentioned earlier unicast broadcasting with OTT, and that this is very different from traditional TV households. So how do you understand who is behind the screen, and how do you reach the people you're seeking for with addressable advertising? I'll let that open, whoever wants to react.
So from a technology point of view, first, I believe the benefit of addressable TV is that there are a number of possible protocols in order to report everything about the ads. Has it been seen, halfway, full length, has it been clicked, etc., etc. So this is very common on the internet world, and there are existing protocols to do that on the let's say OTT TV world. Now the question is, how fast can that be deployed? Keeping in mind that we're talking about millions of subscribers. So there is also a question of scale, but the technology definitely exists, and it's a great technology for the advertiser, because at the end, it means the advertiser have very accurate data. And it's not about what was the audience share last night. It's really about, I know exactly how many viewers have seen the ads full length or halfway through or whatever. So from a technology point of view, I believe we have the right protocols that is doable, even though it's definitely challenging. Now the question is much more on the adoption of such protocols, just like VPaid, for example.
Okay. Tom, do you want to react on the D2C OTT platform? Because you said also by registering users are giving you much more information that you can use. How do you attract advertisers with that information? Because it's a very different world from traditional TV advertising markets. How are advertisers introduced to doing addressable TV ads on OTT?
I think, to Damien's point, clearly you can give them specific kind of measurable data points for particular adverts in the way you're not talking about kind of audience share or reach in this kind of traditional panel approach that you might take on a linear service. But I think there are a number of things to be considered. One is, I think there's some education around what effectively an ad impression means in a video world. We all know the kind of stories about what small percentage of a video might be watched on certain platforms and yet still considered an impression. And I think advertisers really want to know that it's not the first 2 or 3 seconds of their ad that's been seen. It's been whole. So there's a question there about how you measure and report on that, and have that kind of transparency that's necessary for advertiser trust. I think then, of course, you are talking about potentially different audience segments. So I think there's still quite a work in progress about how you kind of take an old currency and a new currency and potentially trying to blend those together in a way that's really meaningful for advertisers, that they can really understand the impact of their campaigns. We've got a lot more data, and that's fantastic. I think helping advertisers to understand what that data is telling them, particularly where you've got buyers who perhaps have come from a traditional TV world and they're now buying on digital platforms, helping them to equate those two. It's something I think the wider industry still has a challenge to tackle this, because the danger otherwise is all you get is multiple currencies in the market. Everyone's got their own currency and different way of doing it. Certainly one of the things we hope is that Planet D isn't the answer to everything, but actually one of the things that we try and do that is actually help to build a common currency and a common way of understanding that advertisers can really kind of understand in a new paradigm what the reach and the effectiveness of their campaign has been compared to perhaps to a traditional TV audience one. But I don't think that honestly that there is a formed answer to this yet. I think it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, of course. I will start now with the questions of our attendees. There's one question from Alvino. Where is the targeted ad revenue normally going to platforms or broadcasters, or both? I will let Albert reply on that because it relates to revenue sharing. So how is the revenue sharing operated between operators and broadcasters when you're doing TV addressable advertising?
Right, yeah. So basically, we don't want to change the ecosystem, which basically means that in most cases the broadcaster is selling the advertising inventory to advertisers, and they charge to the advertiser. And between the broadcaster and ourselves, we have an arrangement basically, and that can be a revenue share arrangement. It can be another kind of arrangement. It depends.
All right. Then there's another question from Frederick. You mentioned that the objective is to have a seamless ad experience between linear and OTT services. Don't you think we are evolving towards a world of OTT first experience with better quality and more adapted to a targeted experience, and where linear will come second? Maybe I will let that question to Remi, because you already discussed about it a bit.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. yes, to answer to Frederick, when we see the trend, when we see, like we mentioned, where the eyeballs are going, clearly OTT will become the mainstream source of revenue when it comes to ads, meaning that brands will invest on OTT campaign or campaign leveraging the flexibility of OTT and OTT platforms as opposed to linear. There will be still, though, the live event. Live event will remain some catalyst for ad campaign. And on that front, I would not say linear, I would say broadcast television will remain predominant because this is where most of the people will be. So it will depend on the type of event. It will depend on the eyeballs. Overall, yes, OTT, and this is what the trend that we will see down the road.
This is a favorite topic of mine. I think we very often, we conflate two things here. One is the method of delivery, and I would say OTT is the method of delivery. OTT doesn't mean VOD. OTT means delivery of a service over the top. And equally, I don't think linear means broadcast either, but a lot of people make that assumption. So I think, yes, there's undoubtedly a trend towards the transport mechanism, if you like, and the consumption mechanism being OTT. But I don't think that necessarily means that linear is going away. And exactly to Remi's point, I think what's happening, what we'll see happen over time, is that linear is great for certain things. You know, it's great for kind of live experiences. It's obvious, you know, that can't be anything but linear. But also linear is great for what we might call, or I think of as event TV. You know, certain kinds of shows, they really, really work actually when you get a social experience and everybody watching at the same time. Our Love Island program, you can watch it as video on demand. Most people prefer, if they can, to watch it as a live program because actually they want to be on Instagram, they want to be on other social media platforms commenting as a social experience while the event is on. So I think maybe saying broadcast versus OTT isn't quite the right thing. I think it's more about the delivery mechanism is moving towards OTT, but I think there is a place for both on-demand and linear content, and there will continue to be into the future.
And on top, I would say that the border between linear and VOD is getting, you know, blurred somehow, because we're seeing more and more VOD platform trying to put content one after another and building a linear experience based on VOD content. So this is something moving somehow. And on the other side, if you're looking at the linear part of and the true linear shows or the true live events, people are more and more expecting it to be as live as possible, which brings to the questions of latency, especially for OTT, trying to reduce that latency. And it ends up being somehow everyone joining a channel at the exact same time for the same content. So we're not really in the old definition of linear. It becomes kind of a rendezvous where everyone expects to see exactly the same content at the same time with the same latency, so that even if you keep tweeting with your friends during the event, everyone is watching exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. So the concept of live versus on demand, to me, is moving around, and it will not stay as it was before. And obviously, putting some ads in this context, you know, in between these linear and those on-demand assets will be a challenge somehow. Rebuilding this linear experience, keeping in mind there are some rendezvous points that should be exactly on time, that there are some ads that will be different from everyone, and on-demand content to be played one after another. Building a real good experience with all of that, that's a good challenge for the future.
Yeah, good way to conclude that. Is there any one of you who would like to conclude on something specific? If not, then I will just invite our attendees, if you have more questions, to reach out to us. You will find the record of that presentation and that discussion on our website, and have a good day to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.